You know that there are giants walking among us today? Well, there are, and I'm not talking about the San Francisco giants or even the New York giants. I'm talking about some intimidating figures that are robbing and killing and holding hostage men and women and young people throughout the land. Specifically, I'm talking about, well, I tell you what, stay with us for just a moment and we'll identify these giants that are among us. All throughout the Bible, we read of amazing men and women who at various times in their lives had to face great personal giants, or we might say barriers, in order to obtain something that was important to them. You know, the Hebrew writer in Hebrews chapter 11 in verse 33 wrote, "Who through faith subdued kingdoms and wrought righteousness and obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions and quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, and turned to flight the armies of the aliens." Hebrews chapter 11, verse 33 and 34. You know, time and time again, these men and women of great faith came out on top and overcame obstacles by keeping their faith in the one who could give them that victory. And the victory wasn't just limited to the old or mature among them, but it was also given to those who were young and those who were still working through their faith in the Lord. In fact, in the Old Testament, we read of a young man named David who marched himself right out onto the battlefield to face a literal giant who had become a stumbling block, not to this young man, but to the very armies of God. You see, the men in the army were afraid of the giant, but not David. And when the Philistine giant saw this young man coming to face him, he said to him, "Come to me, I'll give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field." But not being intimidated one bit, young David whips, "Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I'll smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and unto the wild beasts of the earth, and all of the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give it into your hands." And then in 1 Samuel chapter 17 in verse 48, the Bible says, "And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David," now watch this, friend, "that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And then David took one of those smooth stones, putting it in his sling, and he let it fly. And what do you know? That stone that David slung buried into the head of that great giant Goliath, knocking him to the ground. And then David is able to walk over to take Goliath's own sword and finish him off by beheading this great obstacle, someone who had become a stumbling block to the people of God. Yes, David had his Goliath, but you know, so do people of God today. And teenagers are not immune from facing these giants. In fact, young people today have many giants that they must face along the way. In our program today, we're going to be talking with some young people about the giants that they face and explore how teens can overcome these obstacles and come out victorious, just like David when he had to face that great giant of old. So stay with us, and we'll be back in just a moment for our panel discussion.
So in the Old Testament, we read of a battle between David and Goliath. Now that's more of a physical battle, but today we're asking you about maybe some more emotional, some more mental battles. What are some things that you think young people battle with today?
Young people have the problem of like cussing or whatever because people think it's the cool thing to do these days.
I think from the utmost from either from drugs, from alcohol, especially stuff that's prevalent, especially not here in Florence, but also here in America, and losing a loved one. I mean, I know from that experience it's a hard thing to do, especially as a teenager trying to grow up in high school and stuff. It's difficult, and it's prevalent wherever you go.
I just think about like peer pressure and how people think they have to fall into what their friends are doing to like fit in with them.
I think the media is a big issue these days. The movies, the things we see, what we listen to, what comes in our ears. It's just sometimes like if we stub our toe or something, we'll just accidentally say a word and not even mean to say it. And that happens all the time.
I think for me, the most hard thing that I have to go through in school and just being like a teenage girl is just people constantly telling me who I need to be, how I need to act, and just like constantly seeing things in society telling, oh, you need to look like this, you need to be like this, you need to do all these certain things, and it's just hard to just be everything that everyone wants you to be, and you feel like you're just told what to do in society, and I don't think that teenagers feel like they can be everything that everyone wants them to be, and it's just difficult.
Do you think parents really understand what young people are going through today, the different struggles you guys face today opposed to the struggles they faced when they were growing up?
I think when they were growing up, the struggles were there, but I think they're more prevalent here, especially in 2012 in America, and how things are spiraling down and a Christian standpoint of where it is now. I think back then it was easier, per se, to what it is for us today.
I think they'd like to, but I think that when it actually comes down to it, you know, they can say that, oh, we've been there, we've been through everything, and they might know a lot, and I'm sure they're, like, all adults, and my parents are very wise, but to think that they, have to go through the things that I'm going through now, as much as society's changed and the different things that kids are having to go through, and at such a young age, is just, it's hard to imagine how my parents could have been through what I'm going through now.
I think to a degree they do because they went through that when they were teenagers, but sometimes they don't really understand how much it is.
How much in your mind do you think times have changed between now and when your parents were facing those same battles?
Well, I think they've changed a lot just with the world.
Well, it's time for our panel discussion, and as you can see, I have with me a fine group of young people who are going to be my panelists today. I think it'd be good if we took just a few moments to let them just pass the microphone around and introduce themselves so we'll know who we're talking with today.
My name is Harrison Chastain. I'm a senior at Mars Hill Bible School, and I attend the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama.
My name is Thomas Willingham, and I'm also a senior at Mars Hill Bible School, and I attend the Florence Boulevard Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama.
My name is Kelsey Knox. I'm also a senior at Mars Hill Bible School. I go to Woodlawn Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and I also attend Chisholm Hills Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama.
I'm Alicia Hovatter. I'm also a senior at Mars Hill Bible School. I go to Stony Point Church of Christ in Cloverdale, Alabama.
Well, I appreciate all of you young people being with us for our program today. I know we're going to have some interesting discussion, and of course the reason that we asked you to be on the program is we wanted to get your perspective regarding our subject, because we're talking about battling the giants of youth. You know, David, he's been mentioned already in some of our segments, but he had to go out on the battlefield and face a giant in his life. I'm just wondering, what are some of the giants that you see that young people have to face today?
I think one giant that everyone faces is not fitting in, and just because someone's different doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. Everyone is probably ostracized at some point in their middle school or high school career for something that they enjoy doing, and people look down at them on that, and that's a giant I feel that everyone faces at least at some point, but it's all different for every one of us.
Have the other of you guys, have you ever had that experience of feeling like you didn't fit in?
I've had one experience. I went to a different school before I came to Mars Hill, and I really didn't know who to hang out with, trying to figure out how I was going to make my place at Mars Hill. And Kelsey actually was one of my first friends, and she made me feel more than welcome. It's just those relationships that you develop that help you fit in.
What about any of the others? Have you had an experience where you didn't feel like you were received as well as you should, and what effect did that have upon your life?
the first time whenever I joined the Order of the Arrow and Boy Scouts, there were some times that I did not know many people at all, and so just because I did not enjoy some of the same things, it was a challenge at first, but after a while, a few of my leaders ended up getting me involved with some people that enjoyed and had the same interests that I did, and so it made it a much more enjoyable experience and a much more pleasant area to be in.
Well, I think there are a lot of young people who have to face that as a giant in their life, and probably all of us at times in our life have felt like, we were a pair of brown shoes in a tuxedo store. We were just a little awkward and didn't quite fit in there. But that is a giant that young people have to face. There's no doubt about it. What are some other giants that young people have to face today?
I think overcoming peer pressure, that's a big one.
Peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is peer pressure? Define that by your own words.
Probably trying to be something you're not. That's how I define it. You're pressured into something you don't want to do, you do not understand how to handle, or everybody else is doing it. You hear that all the time. Everybody else is doing it, so.
Peer pressure. Some of the others who are here, have you ever felt like that you were being pressured to do something you didn't really want to do, or something you knew was wrong to do?
Since we go to Mars Hill, most of our friends are from a Church of Christ-based family. And so, but it does still happen. There are times whenever your friends, like maybe, for instance, if they want to talk about somebody behind their back and that kind of thing, then and they keep asking you and they want you to do it, and you're like, well, like, they're my friend, I don't want to do that, and you know it's wrong, and it's something little, but that's kind of.
So peer pressure is a giant that you believe is a great giant that young people today have to face. Are there any other giants that come to mind? I
think there are a ton of giants that we could all name, but the fact of the matter is they're different for everyone. A giant that I might have might be different from a giant that Harrison has, or that Kelsey or Alicia have. It's all by the individual. I think that the fitting in, the peer pressure, those are something that everyone faces in some form or fashion, at least at some point. But other than that, they can all be different.
All right, let's think about this question for just a moment. Are there any giants within the context of the church? Now, I know that one of you, I believe it was Kelsey, mentioned that, she said, I go to Mars Hill and I don't feel that there is as great of a peer pressure that I have to face as opposed maybe to someone who's not, I suppose, benefited by having those kind of friends in their life. But are there giants that sometimes you may have to face even within the confines of the church, or maybe even a youth group?
I think there are, and I've seen them, in our youth group before, and we try to help with it. But a lot of it is what we were talking about earlier, and that is almost the forming of cliques. And I think it happens at a lot of churches, but even especially within the youth group, it's happened before at our church, and people get ostracized, and that does no good for anyone. It makes people, it hurts their feelings, and it ends up being detrimental to them mentally.
Harrison, are there any giants in the church that come to mind that you have to battle from time to time, or maybe not you personally, but you know that other young people have to battle?
I know a friend of mine a few years ago, he was a faithful member of the church, but his parents didn't attend the church, and they were really they were very aggressive on him for going to the Church of Christ, and it was very tempting at times. He really confided in my dad a lot, and he talked about it a lot, and I heard my dad say that he thought about just quitting the church, just not coming at all. And he was very faithful, and he just said, I'm just done with it. I don't want my parents talking about it anymore, and I just don't want to come anymore. And he confided in the youth minister. He confided in his friends and his peers in the youth group, and they helped him through that time. Even though they weren't going through it, they still offered him some advice that would help him along the way. And I think that's a big one that young people face. They get in with good people, and they like hanging around those people, and then when it comes to church and being faithful, their parents don't really like that very much.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. Sometimes the battles that we have to face may be battles even within our own home. Parents, siblings, these things happen from time to time. You know, sometimes though, maybe a parent or grandparent or brother or sister, aunt, uncle, someone else in our extended family, perhaps they're trying to help us or trying to help you as a young person, but really maybe it's hindering you, it's holding you back some. I think about, you know, in the story of David and Goliath, when David first arrived there at the camp and learned of the great giant that was taunting the people of God, and he volunteered to go out because no one else would, and how that King Saul was trying to help David by giving him his own armor, and he put his own armor on David and it just swallowed him up. Well, that was a hindrance to David, even though Saul was trying to help. I wonder, are there ways in which sometimes our families may hinder us, even though it may not be their intention, but can kind of hold us back and keep us from being really diligent in fighting these giants that we have to confront? Harrison?
I think sometimes that that they sometimes tend to be overprotective. They tend to hover over you, and they tend to give you too much advice. We've all heard the quote, prepare your child for the path, not the path for your child. And I think sometimes that parents, they tend to be overprotective, and they try to tell them what to do, but really, you know, when they get 13, 14, and older, they need to decide for themselves, what's the best thing I need to do? And they're going to mess up, they're going to make bad decisions, but it's time for them to be accountable and to make decisions for themselves sometimes.
Along that same context, sometimes they might not tell them exactly what to do, but they'll put a bunch of pressure on the kid to try to get them to do something that they want to do. And sometimes that kind of pressure from someone older makes you want to do the opposite of what they're being told, just so that you just
So there's a fine line between encouraging a young person and then putting pressure upon them where they just feel like they're about to explode, or the pressure's caving in on them.
Like, I know, because for me, whenever I was deciding whether or not I wanted to be baptized, that's why everybody kept telling me, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And so it kept making me think, well, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, like, sometimes that can be a hindrance. And so whenever I did finally get baptized, I knew that it was for me and it wasn't for them. But I know that if they hadn't have put so much pressure on me, that probably would have happened sooner.
Kelsey, that's an excellent personal example, and thank you for sharing that with us.
We all face giants in our lives each and every day. These giants may range from worries in life and stresses at work to family problems or problems with relationships with friends. We all face different giants and different battles that each and every one of us must overcome sometime in our life. It's important that we depend on one another to help us overcome these things, because we know we're not going to be able to do that alone. You can think about the story of David and Goliath found in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Young David comes into the battle and nobody else is even wanting to fight Goliath. But David comes in willing because he knows he has the Lord on his side. That's important for us to know in our life too. We know that God's going to be there for us no matter what we go through. He will always be there for us, and there's nothing that we can do to ever separate us from His love. It's important that we remember that when we're going in to battle these giants. Sometimes when we battle giants and these worries and cares in our life, we seem overwhelmed sometimes. We seem like there's nothing that we can do to overcome these things, but we know with God on our side, we'll be able to do so. It's important that we don't look at how big the giant is, but we realize exactly how big our God is. When going in to battle Goliath, David was not afraid because he knew that his God was so much bigger. When you face worries and cares in your life, yes, the giant in your life may seem big, but remember, your God is so much bigger. And God has also offered us a promise found in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. He tells us, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's so important to remember because we know that God Himself cannot tell a lie. If God says something, He's going to do it. And God has offered us that promise that He will always be there for us, that He's going to be there to support us no matter what we go through in life. Yes, the giant may seem big and it may seem scary sometimes, but it's something that God will be there for us in life. We can't run away from our fears, but we must face them head on. There's a story of a farmer who's walking through the woods one day, and as he's walking across, he comes across a baby eagle laying on the ground. He picks up the baby eagle and carries it back to his farm to save its life. He puts the baby eagle in a pen with the rest of his chickens, and as time goes by, this eagle grows to be a full-grown bird, and but it acts like a chicken. It walks like a chicken. It acts like a chicken. It eats the same things the chicken eats. One day a forest ranger was coming by and he sees this eagle in the pen with the chickens. He stops the farmer and he says, "Why is that huge bird of prey in there acting like a chicken?" The farmer recounts the story of how he found the eagle and saved its life that day in the woods. The ranger then goes into the pen and picks up the eagle and holds it high up in the air and tells the bird to fly away. The eagle panics and jumps back on the ground and runs around with the rest of the chickens. The ranger then picks up the eagle and carries it out on top of a high mountain and holds the eagle up and tells it to fly away. The eagle then looks back at the road that they had just traveled to get there and becomes afraid. The eagle looks all around and is starting to panic and looks up to the sky. He sees another eagle flying high above him. He then opens up his wings and flies away, never to be seen again. You see, I think sometimes we're like that eagle. We get so used to just confronting our giants and hiding in fear of something that we've never done before. We have things in our life that we don't want to face because we're afraid of the outcome. So we spend our life acting like a chicken. We don't want to face the fears of failure. We don't want to face the giants in life. But when somebody encourages us, when we realize that God is there for us and we see somebody else flying high above us like the eagle did, we're able to spread out our wings and fly. Keep in mind that God is there with us no matter what we go through in life. Paul gives us some encouraging words in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. He says, "We are hard pressed on every side, yet we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not in despair. We are persecuted, but we are not forsaken. We are struck down, but we are not destroyed." You think in life sometimes we're knocked to our knees. Sometimes we're beaten so hard that we feel like we can't go on, but we were never destroyed. With God on our side, there's nothing that we can do that will not help us overcome the giants. God is there for us if we're willing to step out and face our giants.
Well, that was a great Word for the Family segment that we just watched, and we're back for the second part of our discussion panel that we are going to have today. And I tell you what, these young folks are doing a great job, and I appreciate them being with me and helping us to get a perspective from a youthful mind. We're going to continue talking about these giants that we sometimes have to face in life, and specifically young people. What do you think that parents can do from your perspective to help you to battle some of these giants that are out there?
Mainly if they would just give you the tools and give you the knowledge, the assets you need to do what is right and to make the right decisions, and even them at times telling you examples from your childhood beforehand helps more than it does after the fact. Because after the fact, sometimes if you mess up, you really don't want to hear what they have to say it sometimes. But if they tell you beforehand and they put you in environments that truly will surround you by other Christians and people that are wanting to do what is right, I think whenever they're doing that without being overbearing and without trying to force an opinion on you, then it's easier for you to make the right decision yourself.
Well, those are some excellent observations, Thomas. I'm also curious as to what you think that a church or a congregation can do to help young people prepare for these giants.
I'll also say that a lot of my friends are in the church, and youth minister or other elders, even my friends' parents who I've known my entire life, are people that I don't mind confiding in, and that no matter what, I know that there are multiple people in my church that if I have a struggle with something or if I need help with anything, I can confide in them. But there are also people, even like my preacher, who if I have a question that I might not even be comfortable asking my parents, I don't mind going and asking him along with other people.
Oh, that's some excellent observation. Alicia, do you want to add something?
I also think that if you become more friendly with the older generation, I love learning about their past and their mistakes and how they handled different situations that they went through. Because some of the things that they went through, I've gone through too. And because I've been able to talk to them, I've been able to handle myself in a proper way. So being able to learn from somebody else's mistakes also helps. You're able to be responsible to make your own decisions.
All right, well, let's think about this question. We've got just a couple of minutes left in our panel discussion today. But what advice would you give to a young person who perhaps just feels intimidated by some giant that's out there, regardless of what that giant may be? what advice would you give them to help them to cope or to overcome this great obstacle that's standing in their way of happiness that they may feel?
Personally, I would say to find someone older than you that you trust and that loves you and you know that has your best interests at heart, and talk to them about it, because they've probably been through something similar, if not the exact same thing. And a lot of times they have great advice to how to help you through it.
All right, so talk to someone who's older and maybe who's gone through that. That could be certainly someone at church, couldn't it? It could be a preacher, an elder, maybe just a longtime faithful member of God's church, or it could be a school teacher, someone that you have confidence in. So that's some good advice. Harrison?
I'd also say talk to multiple people. Maybe talk to obviously an older person, but maybe one of your friends that may have gone through some of the same things, but they may have different ways of handling it, and you can weigh the options and do what's best for you.
Okay. Alicia?
Most importantly, talk to God. Pray, pray, pray continually. Throughout your day, even when I'm driving in my car, I pray that I get to my destination, and it gives me a comfort that I'm able, when I get there, that God was with me. He helps you in so many ways. He works so mysteriously. You don't. It's just weird how sometimes things work out because you've prayed about it.
That's called the providence of God, isn't it? I tell you what, that's some great advice that you have given us today to talk to people who are older than us. Harrison mentioned about talking to a number of different individuals. The Bible says that there's wisdom in the multitude of counselors. And what a great way to end that question by pointing out the importance of going to God in prayer. I just want to thank you, young people, for being with us today. I know this is going to help someone out there who's watching the program. Well, didn't those teens do a great job in our discussion today? Isn't it encouraging to know that there are young people like those who were on our program today who are defeating the giants that they have to face through Jesus Christ, our Lord? I want to thank you for joining us for our program today. This program is brought to you by the Christians that meet at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama. We'd like to extend to you a personal invitation to come and worship with us at your earliest convenience. We're conveniently located near the football stadium of the University of North Alabama on Hermitage Drive in Florence, Alabama. We'd also like to offer to you a free Bible correspondence course that can help to enrich your life as you study the Word of God. All you have to do is let us know that you'd like this free study, and we can either send it to you by the U.S. mail, or we can make arrangements to offer a study through the internet by a website that will be found on your screen along with our contact information in just a moment. Next week, we're going to have another informative family-related topic that I'm sure you're not going to want to miss. So until next time, I'm Barry Gilreath, your host, and for the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, we wish you and your family a blessed week.